While you were sleeping is what happens when the wrong lie gives the right lonely person a place to belong. Sandra Bullock is Lucy, alone in a glass token booth, watching Chicago rush past like nobody could ever stop for her. One accident turns her crush into a coma patient, her mistake into an engagement, and Christmas into the loudest family she has ever had. Peter Gallagher is Peter, the dream man who barely stays awake long enough to become real. And Bill Pullman is Jack, the brother standing just outside the lie, slowly becoming the reason Lucy wants to tell the truth. Today we're counting down 10 weird facts about While You Were Sleeping, from the much darker version it almost became to the casting search that nearly changed everything, all hiding inside a Christmas romance about pretending to be engaged to a man in a coma while falling for his brother. Point 1. It started as a stalker movie. While You Were Sleeping started as a joke a man told about himself. Co-writer Frederick Lebo said he was such a loser, he couldn't land a date with a woman who was unconscious. He had met Daniel Sullivan in an NYU writing class, two unknowns struggling to get a Hollywood agent to even read their pages. The joke became the seed of a script. The first draft played it straight. The lead was a lonely fish salesman in New York who spots a beautiful Scandinavian woman across the street. Before he can say a word, a newspaper truck hits her, and she falls into a coma. They pitched it at Disney, and an executive stopped them cold, telling them flatly they had written a stalker movie. Nobody would root for a man lying his way into the life of an unconscious woman. It wasn't romantic. It was predatory. The writers walked out deflated and ended up in a diner down the street where, defeated over coffee, Lebo asked the question that saved the film. What if it's a girl? That single question flipped the entire premise. Same setup, completely different feeling. A man at a stranger's bedside read as a predator. The same scene with a lonely woman mistaken for the fiancé read as awkward and vulnerable and sweet. That diner question saved the script, and a different kind of accident was about to save the movie. Point 2. Disney's backup choice became the perfect fit. The best thing that happened to While You Were Sleeping was losing its first director. Disney wanted Chris Columbus, the man behind Home Alone, and Mrs. Doubtfire, who printed money in the family comedy aisle. On paper, he was the safe, obvious, expensive choice. But he grew uncertain about the project and walked, leaving Disney's Caravan Pictures scrambling. The replacement came fast and came lower wattage. John Turteltaub, fresh off Cool Runnings, was cheap enough to gamble on and good enough to trust. Then he did the thing a studio is supposed to hate. He loosened his grip. Turteltaub directed warm and collaborative, so soft on set, he joked he sounded like a Boy Scout troop leader. For a romantic comedy carrying a studio's 9-figure hopes, that reads as the resume of a man about to lose control of his movie. Except this movie was built to be a little out of control. It ran on awkward pauses, nervous over-talking, and people fumbling through moments they couldn't quite manage. A tighter director would have sanded every one of those edges into clean rom-com gloss and killed the thing that made it work. Turteltaub did the opposite, telling Bullock to keep talking until she felt like she'd lost control completely. That runaway anxiety became the engine of Lucy. Lucy isn't a polished heroine. Jack isn't a polished lead. The Calligans aren't a clean movie family. They're loud and warm and fumbling. Point 3. A superstar would have broken Lucy. Half the A-list circled Lucy. The names were enormous. Meg Ryan got there first and passed. Julia Roberts and Nicole Kidman moved through the mix, and Demi Moore was not a casual maybe. She was set to do the movie until the deal collapsed over a contract nobody could agree on. The problem was never talent. It was believability. Lucy only works if the world looks straight past her. The entire story rests on her being invisible. Drop a global superstar into that token booth, and the illusion cracks before the first scene ends. Turteltaub put it almost cruelly, saying Moore and Kidman were way too pretty, joking about how impossible it would be to de-beautify Nicole Kidman. Then Bullock arrived at the one moment in her career when she could vanish. Speed opened in June 1994. This started filming that October. She read the script while still shooting Speed, before the world had decided who she was, and she went after the part herself, calling the studio directly because it was exactly the kind of movie she wanted to make. What pulled her in was not the romance. It was the loneliness, Lucy's ache for a family she did not have. She could disappear behind that glass in a way Roberts or Kidman never could. The A-list was too visible to play invisible. Point 4. Jack needed quiet. Not star power. Jack's waiting room was just as crowded as Lucy's. Turtletub never wavered on his pick, saying with no question that Bill Pullman was the guy, but Pullman wasn't alone in the running. Patrick Swayze and Dennis Quaid moved through the mix, and so did a very young Matthew McConaughey before the world had met him. The man was, in Turtletub's words, unbelievably charming. The trouble was geography. McConaughey still carried a thick Texas accent, and the movie was already wired into Chicago. They weren't about to rewrite the script to explain why one Chicago brother grew up in Texas. The charisma was real, but the accent didn't fit the block. What Jack actually needed was the opposite of dazzle. He had to feel grounded, a little awkward, decent, and believable as the quieter brother in a loud working-class family. That was Pullman exactly. Pullman had a reputation for playing the safe other guy, the one who loses. He'd just been Walter in Sleepless in Seattle, the dependable fiancé the heroine leaves behind. Now this film flipped his whole job. He wasn't the obstacle between two lovers anymore. He was the love story. The magic showed up in the parts nobody scripted. Pullman and Bullock fell into a loose, offbeat rhythm the moment they started playing off each other. The famous leaning scene where Jack teases Lucy about the way men lean on walls to flirt wasn't on the page. It came straight out of the two of them riffing on set. McConaughey would have lit up that booth. Pullman just leaned against a .5. The rewrite that nearly ruined everything. The movie almost died in a single table read. Producers later called it the worst one they had ever sat through. The studio had brought in a new writer to punch up the comedy, routine on paper, but the new pages shoved the movie entirely the wrong way. The sweet, grounded romance went broad and loud and cartoonish. The quiet ache underneath was vanishing under jokes that belonged to a different film. Then they read it out loud, and the room caved in. Nothing landed. Everyone at that table felt it at once. The collapse hit hardest on Bill Pullman, already raw, already unsure he could carry a romance opposite Bullock, already out of his depth as the man the heroine actually picks. When the read fell flat, he took it as proof he wasn't enough. He tried to quit, but his agent told him he was locked into the contract. Turtletub had to pull Pullman aside and convince him his awkwardness wasn't the issue. The script was. The producers saw it too. They killed the new direction and brought Sullivan and Lebo back, the two who started the whole thing in that diner. They restored the warmer, quirkier, softer tone, the register that made the premise sing before anyone tried to fix it. Pullman studied. The movie remembered what it was. It never needed bigger jokes. It needed its heart back. Point 6. Doing nothing became the hardest performance. Peter Callahan was written for Pierce Brosnan. The writers were thinking 007. The dreamboat Lucy invents an entire life for from behind her glass booth before she knows one real thing about him. The role went to Peter Gallagher, and his actual job turned out to be stranger than playing any heartthrob. For most of the movie, Gallagher had to lie in a hospital bed and do absolutely nothing. He joked it was the easiest money he ever made, then refused to treat it that way. If Peter was in a coma, Gallagher was going all the way under. He stayed in the bed between takes instead of getting up to reset and skipped late nights during filming, afraid he might actually fall asleep too deep on set. The lying down was never the hard part. It was who stood around the bed. Those Callahan family scenes were packed with veteran comics, wall-to-wall ad-libs, people cracking jokes inches from his face. Gallagher had to absorb every one of them without moving, no twitching eyelids, no flinch, no reacting to a punchline landing right on top of him. He held it through deep breathing and meditation-style focus and got good enough that the crew sometimes thought he'd genuinely passed out. The whole room would dissolve into giggling while Gallagher lay there motionless, refusing to crack. Out of all that stillness, he and Peter Boyle, playing his father Ox, clicked fast over their shared Irish Catholic roots, building the warmest father-son bond in the movie despite one of them spending the whole film unconscious. Point 7. The family was the love story the whole movie runs on a quiet trick. Lucy isn't really falling for Jack. She's falling for his entire family, which meant the Calligans could not be generic background relatives. Disney stacked the household with veteran character actors and spent the film's energy making this family feel worth wanting. Glynis Johns played Elsie, the grandmother who swallows Lucy's lie almost too easily. Johns was Disney royalty, having been Winifred Banks in Mary Poppins decades earlier. Bullock and Pullman kept bringing her tea and blankets between takes through the brutal Chicago shoot. Jack Warden played Saul, the family friend who clocks the truth before anyone. Warden and Johns were close in real life, and their timing shows it. At the Christmas party, Johns lands the line, "I don't drink anymore," and Warden replies, "I don't drink any less," a punchline he had delivered years before on Bewitched. His small, perfectly timed, unscripted nod made a written gag look like a joke this old friend had heard 100 times. The Calligans interrupt each other, laugh at the wrong moments, worry too loud, and love too loud. Lucy isn't being pulled into a clean movie family. She's being pulled into one that feels like it existed long before the camera showed up. Point 8. A marketing note gave it a soul. The two things people remember most about While You Were Sleeping were never part of the original idea. The story didn't start in Chicago. The first version was set in Brooklyn, and Christmas wasn't in the script at all. The holiday backdrop came later for mostly business reasons. The studio figured a holiday setting would be easier to sell, a marketing note, and nothing more. Except that marketing note accidentally became the emotional engine of the whole film. Dropping the story into the dead quiet week between Christmas and New Year's made Lucy's loneliness cut deeper and made the Callahan house feel enormous by contrast. The move to Chicago worked the same way from another direction, giving the movie a face through elevated trains, a token booth, iced-over streets, and a working-class block. Turtletube pushed it further, insisting on shooting in the actual Chicago winter instead of a controlled backlit version. That choice punished everyone and shows on screen. The real cold made the whole movie feel lived in. Everyone looks bundled, tired, and frozen, and that same weather made the family interiors feel warmer, the chill outside selling the heat inside. The two things never in this movie's DNA became two of the biggest reasons it still works. The studio changed it to sell it and handed it a soul by accident. Point 9. A sleeper hit refused to become a franchise. While You Were Sleeping wasn't built like an event. Made on about $17 million, it became one of 1995's defining sleeper hits, and the studio wanted more so badly it tried to buy the writers' cars. It debuted April 21, 1995, at number 1 with around $9.3 million, knocking Bad Boys off the top. Most gentle rom-coms drop hard once the ads stop. This one grew in its second weekend, the clearest signal that word of mouth had taken over. The film rode that to roughly 81 million domestic and 182 million worldwide. Ebert gave it a thumbs up, writing that the movie blindsides you with its charm, and The Hollywood Reporter called it warm-hearted and Capper-esque. That reception mattered because the premise could so easily have curdled into something fake or creepy or syrupy. The finished film just played sincere. Disney wanted a sequel badly enough to offer the screenwriters new cars if they could crack a premise worth making. Sullivan and Lebo said no. They felt the story had already reached its ending, and they walked. That refusal is part of why the movie still feels whole. Some stories chase a sequel. This one knew it was already finished. Point 10. Bullock lost the award. Won the career speed made Sandra Bullock famous. While You Were Sleeping made her a movie star, and then the awards handed her a piece of irony almost too perfect to be real. Speed ran on adrenaline and survival. This one ran on warmth, awkwardness, timing, and loneliness, and pulling off that second kind of movie is what actually moved her career. Bullock earned her first Golden Globe nomination for the film, Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy, at the 53rd Globes. Then she lost to Nicole Kidman for To Die For, one of the women who had come close to playing Lucy before the role ever reached Bullock. So one of the women who nearly had the part beat Bullock for the very award that part earned her. The loss didn't matter. The nomination did. She wasn't the action breakout anymore. She was a romantic comedy lead, and by every account she'd never been happier on a set, calling it the most fun she ever had making a movie. After each wrap, the cast piled into local salsa places to dance and played categories deep into the night. That off-screen warmth was the exact feeling the movie gave off on screen. That same year, she founded her own production company, Fortis Films. The outfit that would later help power Miss Congeniality and 2 weeks' notice. The actress nobody had decided on yet had quietly become the one nobody could replace. Bonus fact: Joe Jr. never left Brooklyn. Joe Jr. feels like he walked in from a different film, and he basically did. Everyone else fits the Midwest working-class Callahan world. Joe Jr. doesn't. He's louder, pushier, obsessed with the neighborhood, and unmistakably Brooklyn, like a man speaking a different dialect of comedy than everyone around him. That mismatch isn't a mistake. It's a fossil. The movie was originally written for Brooklyn, and Joe Jr. was built inside that version. When the story moved to Chicago, the whole film adjusted around the new city. Joe Jr. never did. Lebo said the character kept that real New York Italian quality precisely because he came from the first draft. The whole movie moved cities. Joe Jr. never got the memo. A leftover from a draft that doesn't exist anymore, still loud, still nosy, still pure Brooklyn. And there it is, 10 weird facts about the diner question that turned a coma fantasy into a love story, the rom-com Hollywood refused to bet big on, and the accidental Christmas classic that quietly became part of the season. Which fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, like and subscribe, and send this to the friend you used to watch this with at Christmas. They've earned a rewatch.
See you next time.